Joining me now is 2nd District Congressman French Hill. We are always good to visit with him and appreciate him being with us this morning. Congressman, let's begin first. The president, his first overseas trip, he has gone to the Middle East, he's gone to Europe. He has wanted to reset some relations, the United States, with some other countries around the world, some other regions around the world. What do you think the message has been so far on this foreign trip that he has done that's different from President Obama's doctrine?
Well, it's a good question, and good morning. Thanks for having me. I think what President Trump wanted to do, first and foremost, was show that the United States is re-engaging and leading on finding a solution in North Korea after three presidents, Clinton, Bush, and Obama, where we drifted in trying to stop the North Korean nuclear advance. Re-engaging in the Middle East and bringing energy, the American energy necessary to find peace in the Middle East and create a consensus and a coalition to beat ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Well, he has obviously communicated with some words where he wants to go, what he wants to do, but we have been told to follow the president's actions, not necessarily his words. So what actions do you want to see next?
Yeah, again, good points. Number one, I think on terror finance. We know that in the Shiite world that Iran, Hezbollah are the largest supporters of terrorism in the Shia world, and so continued pressure and sanctions in and around the Iranian deal and on the Assad regime sanction-wise, I think is an important set of actions for the Trump administration. And in the Sunni world, he announced that he would set up with the Gulf Cooperation Council a terror finance interdiction operation in the Gulf region. I think that's an important component. I think Secretary Mnuchin plans a trip to the Mideast later in the year to bring that to fruition. And that's important, Roby, because we obviously know there are Sunni interests that finance radical Islamic terror as well. And so I think those are important actions that he needs to take in the Middle East region. And I believe engagement by the Americans with the Europeans on finding a solution in the Ukraine is important as we turn the page from the Middle East and look at challenges in the European theater.
All right, let's bring it back home, talk about some things happening on the domestic front. Let's start first with the Trump budget proposal that was rolled out a little bit earlier this week. Ramps up military spending. There are some tax cuts in there. There are also some budget cuts to Medicaid, to food stamps, to some welfare and disability benefits. I was curious because your response said that you kind of appreciated the president putting this out there, but this is a congressional decision to make. What do you oppose in the budget that you've seen that you think is just a deal breaker?
Well, let's talk about defense and non-defense. In defense, after 8 years of budget caps and a declining engagement with rebuilding our military, we've got military readiness at an all-time low probably since pre-Vietnam. We have only 70% of our aircraft in the Marine Corps are unflyable now. We've had some terrible air disasters for our pilots. So readiness, that was something I think is good. It's a good start off the President Obama baseline for defense. In the non-defense discretionary spending area, this is where Congress does a lot of the work, whether it's on ag policy for crop insurance, investments that we make in research like at the National Institutes of Health, and all that'll have to go through congressional review and approval. But what I appreciated was Donald Trump presenting his suggestions for a balanced budget in a 10-year window, something that this Congress has not seen from the previous administration.
So are you going to be supportive of cuts to Medicaid, to food stamps, to some of the USDA programs that you mentioned, so disability benefits? You think that that's just inevitable? There's going to have to be less spending in those areas?
Well, what we have to do is have the priorities set for the most vulnerable and work from there in the discretionary budget. But we can't solve our long-term deficit reduction plans and the need to make sure that we have fiscal stability in this country without reforming our mandatory spending programs, which President Trump really does not address in this budget, with the exception that you noted, which is trying to create some improvements in things like Social Security disability eligibility and authorization. I have a bill that proposes ways to change the Social Security disability system to encourage people to use it as a short-term benefit and then get back to work. Those are things that can produce substantial savings, but we will never get this country on the right fiscal trajectory until we see long-term bipartisan supported reforms in our mandatory spending programs, which again is not a priority of this particular budget document.
Right, and I have not really seen a lot of consensus building on that particular subject matter. Let's change subjects to another domestic issue here, and that is the president is going to return back to the United States to a continuing probe now led by a special counsel under the direction of Robert Mueller. You actually do some work on a subcommittee of the Financial Services Committee. It's the Oversight and Investigations Committee, where you guys actually track some of the things that are going on in financial transactions around the world. I know that is some sensitive material there, but can you give me an update on what you guys are specifically looking at through that lens?
Well, we do have a subcommittee, a full subcommittee of the House Financial Services Committee now that's on illicit finance and terror financing. And what we're doing right now is three major areas. One, we're considering updating the Bank Secrecy Act on how we collect all the reported transactions through the banking system. It hasn't really been updated since it was put in place in 1970. Obviously, the Patriot Act after 9/11 made some changes. That's going to be a big issue. Secondly, how do we really capture information most easily for shell companies that are being formed in the United States and elsewhere to hide ownership of certain assets and certain money trails? And thirdly, something that I think is going to be fascinating and have critical benefit to both the private sector and the government sector is how do we deal with digital currency in the emerging world of Bitcoin and blockchain transaction analysis. So we've got a robust agenda there. Steve Pierce, our chairman, is really working that topic hard. We're in partnership with the Treasury Department in setting those priorities.
We got about less than 60 seconds left here. Last question for you. You were working with the congressional delegation on an expansion of the Little Rock Central High historic site. Tell me what's at work there, why you think this is necessary.
Well, we love our historic district that surrounds Central High School, one of the absolute touchstones of the civil rights movement. And Senator Cotton and Senator Leahy in the Senate and the civil rights icon John Lewis and I here in the House have put a bill forward to expand the streetscape and protect that inside the Central High boundaries. This will protect the houses that are right there in front of the school so that we can have a protection of that streetscape from the time of 1957.
All right, he is 2nd District Congressman French Hill. As always, good to visit with you. Thank you for spending some time with us.
You bet. Good to see you.